You might ask yourself the question, where does scientific research begin? How does it begin? And that's essentially the topic of this particular lecture on basic structural research. Before we can conduct an experiment in which we um, identify a treatment in an effort to influence some kind of behavior, we have to discover the things to treat. We actually have to make discoveries, and that's what basic structural research is about. Basic research is the work that's done to actually identify things. And structural research is an effort to understand how things essentially develop or are organized. And this is the kind of research, structural research is the kind of research I tend to do. I'm personally very influenced by Piaget's work. And what structural research often does is identifies developmental stages of things. So you'll recognize then that structural research pretty much is the basis for most of the material that you are learning in these language acquisition or phonological acquisition courses, where you're learning about development. Research about development is structural research. Basic research is very related, and it is research that identifies things that actually exist that we can then try to have an influence on in the future when we conduct experiments. So basic research is really where scientific research begins. Now, an example of basic research, you see basic research in fields such as archaeology or anthropology, where people go out into the field and discover things. In fact, I'm going to post right now in a small video clip about research that was recently done, basic research, in which a new homonym or type of human creature was discovered as part of an archaeological dig. Let's take a look at that.
Gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce you to a new species of human ancestor. A new species. He is pretty. He's worth applause, isn't he? A new species within our very genus. A species that we have called Homo naledi. Naledi meaning star.
And even before the discovery is made, what may motivate the actual going out to make the discovery is ultimately will always be an effort to relate the discovery to something. We are humans, we make relationships, that's what we do. So the bones ultimately are not just left there in a pile, but instead relationships are made among bones in this case, because they are actually put together they were actually assembled to make a human being. Other archaeologists assemble bones to make dinosaurs. And the assembly of the bones, the ability to assemble those bones, means that each bone itself was placed into a category, was seen as part of something. So there's the humerus bone and the skull bone and the cheekbone and whatever bone. The bones were actually classified by these researchers, and classified not only as being part of a bigger skeleton, but the skeleton itself was classified either, again, as a homonym as compared to a dinosaur, so to speak. And thus, and then a decision was made that the type of homonym that this skeleton represented was different from all other types of homonyms that have been identified, so therefore a new category was generated. Now this generation of categories, that's a construct. And in other words, even in the domain of basic research where things are discovered, immediately the discoverers turn to theory. They have observable, measurable things, bones, in the case of anthropology, perhaps a custom, a behavior that's demonstrated by a particular culture, someplace or other. And they take that behavior or that bone and place it into a category, which is part of a broader set of connections that are made by the researchers, that have been made by the researchers, and that are made by the researchers that make the discovery meaningful. That's what basic research is about, interestingly enough. So we're going to look at a particular kind of basic research in this program, or in this lecture, and in this course, and that is structural research. Now, the field of language is not about bones or physical things, it's about behaviors. So what has to be discovered in our field is the parts of what makes language up. Things that have been discovered so far are things like semantics and semantic rules, syntax and syntactic rules, pragmatics and pragmatic rules, and all the subcomponents of all of this. These are components of language, at least from a psycholinguistic point of view. As we have spoken before, other camps of thought have identified other parts of language, other things that belong to language, such as verbal behaviors, consequences, antecedents in the operant field, in the information processing field, pre-linguistic processes, linguistic and metalinguistic processes, and all the subcomponents, the processes, sub-processes or component processes that go along with these things, such as memory processes and retrieval processes, etc. These are all things that are discovered and were discovered in the course of basic research in the behavioral field of linguistics. Now, we're going to look at structural research as it applies, and especially as it applies to the development of stuff in the area of language. And I am going to try to illustrate some of this by engaging you in a problem-solving task. I must say that I am challenged by trying to teach you about structural research in an online course, because I have to do the way I have to communicate with you primarily is by talking. And structural research tends to be more about doing, about natural behavior in natural situations, such as children speaking while playing or while interacting with their caregivers, or our engagement or a child's engagement in a problem-solving task where there's something hands-on that you're engaged with. So I'm going to try to engage you in a hands-on task to understand structural research a little bit, and I'm going to bring my children down here to engage in the task. Actually, that I'm going to try to get you engaged in, and I'm going to try to talk about structural research through a particular task, and then generalize some of what I have to say to the general field of language and to the general area of type of research that I am calling structural research. The Tower of Hanoi, or the Hanoi Tower. Now, the way it works, and I'm going to start out with 3 disks and move up to 5 disks. It is a problem-solving task that involves moving these concentric disks, sequenced seriated disks, one is bigger than the other, moving them from across 1, 2, 3 posts so that the set of disks ends up on a target post in the same order that it starts out with in the beginning post. The issue is here, or the rules are as follows. You cannot put, you have to move them one at a time. And you can put them on any post and go in any direction. You can go this way, you can go this way. It doesn't matter. But you have to move one move at a time. You can skip a post, you can start on either post, but one move at a time. You can only move one disk at a time, that is, one disk at a time. And you cannot put a big disk on top of a small disk. That is cheating. That is not permitted. You can only put a big disk by itself, or a disk on top of another disk, but it's got to be a smaller disk on top of a bigger disk. You cannot put a bigger disk on top of a smaller disk. You move them one at a time. You also cannot put disks aside, move a disk and then bring them back. Disks always have to be on a pole. The goal again is to move all 3 disks from one post to a target post. Why am I doing this? I'm going to try to understand developmental stages that individuals go through as they learn to do this task. The kind of research I do is based on this kind of theory, this particular neo-Piagetian theory. That theory is that individuals go through developmental stages. They pass through developmental stages each time they're faced with a novel, complex task. So you may, in the older Piagetian research, individuals are seen to go through a developmental stage at a particular age, and then beyond that, they're seen as being at that stage, regardless of the problem in front of them. They're thought of as thinking about things at a particular level. So once you get object permanence, you have object permanence in all situations. Once you get concrete operations, if you remember that from the Piagetian, some Piaget material you may have gotten in a course somewhere, then you'd be concrete operational at any stage. If linguistically, speaking of Bloom and Leahy, you're using causal, you're productive for causal utterances, then you're going to generate the particular kind of causal utterance across experiences in your life once you get to that stage. That is traditional stage theory. I don't believe that. I believe that your ability to perform is influenced by the context. So that when you're in a novel, complex situation, something new and something complicated in front of you, you may not be able to address that problem the same way you would address, at the same level you would address something familiar about which, something that's familiar to you and about which you're an expert. For me, I know Piagetian theory, I've made a career out of it. So I can talk about that and use complex causal utterances and maybe even solve some of Piaget's more complex problems in a high-level way. But ask me to repair a car or identify even what the cause might be of a problem, an automobile problem, and forget it. All I know is call AAA or call my garage and get the thing towed. Let them take care of it. I can't even begin to think about that. I don't know the parts of a car, etc., etc. And even if I did, I wouldn't know how to approach it at this point. Not until I had experience, and then maybe I could become a high-level thinker about car mechanics. But right now, I'm not there. Even though I'm there, I'm a high-level thinker in the Piagetian domain. Following me? My developmental stage does not generalize across all areas. So what I do then is study how individuals, particularly college students and children, develop as they're experiencing a problem-solving task. Now that enterprise requires or invokes structural research. You have to design your research in a structural way, and I'll get into that after we play around a little bit with this task, okay? So I'm going to ask my kids to do a 3-disc Hanoi tower and just take a look at what they do, and then I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, but instead of 3 discs, I'm going to ask you to work with a 5-disc task.
Yeah.
11 years old, okay, in 6th grade, okay, this is the 3-disc Hanoi tower, or Tower of Hanoi. The whole idea is you have to get these 3 circles in the same order over here to this particular post, to this pencil here. You can only move one at a time, and you cannot put a big one on a small one, but you can put a small one on a big one. You can go this way, you can go this way when you move, it doesn't matter. The idea is to get all 3 on here in the fewest moves you can do it in. Okay?
Am I
Get it?
competing against anyone?
No, just you.
Okay, good.
You're just doing it. No competition. Okay.
Oh, I got it. Got it.
Very good. Hooray.
I did it.
There you go. Excellent. Wait, don't leave. I'm going to do it one more time, but this time get them on the middle. On one at a time. Start there. Now start from where you're at.
So
Yeah.
So what am I supposed to do now?
The same thing, but this time start there and get them in the middle. Make them end up in the middle.
Okay. Oh.
You can start again if you want, or keep going from there.
I'm gonna keep going from here. What did I do?
Very good. All right. Okay. One more.
Okay.
Get. I want them to bend up back here again now.
Starting from here.
From the middle, right from where they are. What's your first? When you're ready to move the first one, tell me why. What you're gonna do and why. Like, what's your first move gonna be?
This
Yeah.
is gonna go here. So
Why
I can
is
move
that?
it out of the way
Yeah.
to get this over here.
Okay.
So then I'm gonna move this here,
Yeah.
and then I'll get this here,
Mm.
this on the other side, this on top of it, this over here, and then I can put this
Excellent.
here so I can put this
Yeah.
there and
Okay.
that there.
Now you give me advice. If I'm going to do it now, I want to end up in the middle. What should I do first, and why
Put
should I do
the
it?
smallest string here,
Why?
so you could put this over here to free this up to end up getting it here somehow. That's my best explanation.
Okay. Here.
Yes.
Then move this here.
Yes.
And move this back here.
Yes. Actually, never mind. Never mind.
Let's start again.
Yeah.
What's my first move and why?
So you're supposed to get it here.
Yeah, I want to end up there.
Move this here,
Why here?
so I can free up space to put something here in the end. Then this here.
Uh-huh.
I knew you would need.
Yeah. The way the camera's working, yeah.
And then
Maybe
put
I'll do it.
this over here.
Okay.
And then put this over here.
Right. I get it. Did
That on
this
top of here.
right? Yeah. Okay.
That
Very good.
there.
You can
This
move it.
here.
You
and
can
then
finish it
that
up
on
for me.
top.
Okay.
Can I do mine?
Yeah. 1 second. Very good. Very good.
How many moves is that?
I didn't go.
A lot, though, right?
Not too bad.
Probably.
What's the best first move? What do you think now? Best first
To
move.
get it here or here.
Yeah, which is the best place to go?
To
And why?
make it go where?
To do it in fewest moves possible. I want this to be in the middle.
You would have to put this over here.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, this is how I.
Okay, now this is
Wait,
my.
Dad, can I have ice cream?
Where is it upstairs? Right.
No, it's downstairs.
There's 2 of them in the one upstairs.
Okay, bye
I
bye.
think. Hey, hey.
Alright.
Wait a second. Let me introduce you. This is my
Wow.
This is son number 2. This is Jordan, 12 years old. Okay, I want to get all these 3 discs
I
over
know
to
how
the
to do
end
it.
thing now. Okay.
Orange over here. Just drop it. Green here. Orange over here. Black over here. Orange over here. Green here.
Okay, very good.
Orange.
Can't do any faster than that. Right. Now,
You can't go past them.
in the middle, I want you to take it from here and make them be piled up here now.
What are you trying to improve here? Can I think this
In
out?
the same
Can I think this
the
out?
fewest number of moves.
Alright.
Yeah, you can take it out, of course.
Got it.
Got it.
Let me just think. Let's make. Yeah, got it.
Okay, very good. Yep, you got it. One more move. I want these now to end up over here. But before you go first, you tell me what's your first move and why. What's the first move and why?
The best first move is to
Yeah, I
put
want
this
the best
either
first move.
this either here or there.
What-
It doesn't really matter.
Does it matter?
No, not in my opinion.
Okay, go.
So actually, yes, it does matter. I'm gonna put
Does
it.
matter?
It does matter.
Why?
Because if you put this here
Yeah.
and then you put this over here, you'd have to like rearrange things a lot, and then you just be like stuck there. And I can't. I'm not good at explaining things. This goes there. This goes over here. This goes here. This goes here. This is gonna fall off the table.
Oh.
This goes here and then this goes there.
Would you want to try to 5 this one? I'm just going to make it this to there.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, 5 discs though. 5.
Let's take the small. I'm
I'm
gonna
not
go with
gonna
my
say
original.
anything.
What I
Just do it.
normally do. I'm gonna go what I normally do. That, right? 5 discs is so hard. I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is the hot bar. 5 discs is a very advanced one now.
I don't know what I'm doing. This is so confusing. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. No, I can't. I can't, because now look, I can't.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I can't really do anything now.
Why?
I'm back where I started.
No.
I'm not getting anywhere.
Remember, you have to get this one over there.
I know.
So you have this over here. No, you're not getting anywhere?
No, there's nothing I can do. I mean, I could... Voila. And 4. Move that too.
Well, I want to.
I know.
You're allowed to jump across. You're allowed to jump across. Well, no. Just leave it there. You can hop.
What do you mean I can hop?
You can hop the black one.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that.
No,
I didn't see that.
that's weird.
Ooh. Wait, what? No. Then the green one.
Yeah. This is taking a long time. Well, there's a lot of discs.
I need to get the green one.
Very good.
There, green. Green done. Now it's gonna be a lot easier.
Stop and tell me what your next move is going to be and why.
This is gonna go here, because with my original thing, what I did last time.
Oh, now you're back to 3.
Yeah. Wait, I wanna maybe put this here, because I'm, yeah.
Very good. So you saw everything. Very good.
Did
There
I?
you go. Yes, you did. Of course.
Yes, I
course you
did.
did. Very good.
Just get off. Get off.
Well,
There!
yeah.
That took a long time.
Excellent. Okay.
How can I see you do it?
Can you see me do it?
Maybe
Lock
after
it
you're
up,
done
you do it
filming?
again. Ah,
When you're done filming? Can you do it?
I'll do it right now while I'm filming. Let's see if I can do it. Okay. Let's
I wanna
see
see
what
how
I do.
smart
What's
my
the
father
best
is.
move? Well, I want everybody who watches this to
Follow along at home.
do it. You are assigned to make a Tower of Hanoi and practice the task, okay?
What are you doing?
Let's see if I can do it. I'm showing you how to do it.
Oh my god, what? It's not fair.
However, when you
I see.
practice it, please do
Oh.
not use my tape. In fact, I'm only going to go this far, just to show you that
Yeah, oh wow, that's awesome.
I can probably do it.
I don't think you can do it. No, but now you have to do the black one.
Well, it jumps. Get it?
Okay.
I would do it, but I'm asking everybody to do it themselves. without me doing it, just to get at first of all, an experience that is a very, very popular in the psych literature. This is a very popular task. And it's one of the tasks that Piaget himself studied in his equilibration research. He talks about, well, actually, it was not Piaget, it was Bointer with kids with learning disabilities, and I'm blanking on the name of the guy who did the research, a French. It was in France and Switzerland that the original research was done with the Tower of Hanoi on Piagetian stages that individuals go through when they learn to solve the task. You try, everybody, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to put it on stop. There's a dog down here. Okay, so what makes structural research structural research? Now, structural research is qualitative research, and that is we're identifying kinds of things or actual things. The things we're identifying in this particular study that I'm doing with you right now are stages in the acquisition of knowledge about how to conduct the Hanoi Tower, how to solve the Hanoi Tower, the Tower of Hanoi problem-solving task. Structural research fits into basic research because we're identifying things that belong, in this case, that belong to cognitive development and language development, because part of the development of learning how to solve the task is being able to talk about why one does one procedure or another. At least I believe that that's the case. Now, what are some qualities of this kind of research? And again, the example I'm playing around with you is I'm actually doing some work with this Hanoi Tower business. I've posted a couple of articles for you to look at of my own related to causal language in kids with adolescents with learning disabilities, and it's the development of causal language in a board balancing task, very similar to the task, this Hanoi Tower task procedure I'm doing with you. But in that case, we were looking at a board balancing task. There's another one up, I think, on procedural knowledge in context of a tractor-trailer task. And all of Piaget's work is structural, by the way. The original Piaget research, Lois Bloom's work in the area of language acquisition, that work that had developed the content, that identified the content categories and the phases of children's development in the area in content form use interactions. That was structural. What makes structural research structural? First of all, it tends to, this kind of research, as I said, tends to identify stages or phases in development. And the dependent-independent variable relationship, or the independent-dependent variable relationship in a structural article, presumed, is that the way the mind organizes information influences the behavior of the individual. So as cognition develops, comments and behaviors about the task develop. So it's the cognition, what going on in your mind, that is influencing your behavior, and that as cognition develops, your awareness about things and your the way you apply that awareness to problem solving, your behavior modifies. In the Lois Bloom language structural research, ultimately she identified content categories of ideas that she saw as influencing the child's speech, what the child spoke about. So as the child developed existence, action, locative action, they talked about objects, actions, locations, etc. Now, Another way to look at the independent-dependent variable relationship in structural research, another way to look at it is the independent variable in structural research is also the actual act of problem solving, the actual doing of the problem. For example, the actual solving of the Hanoi Tower problem, or at least the working on the problem. That's independent, and dependent is stages of development. That out of doing it comes the behavior, ways of thinking about it, which influences your behavior, or ultimately doing it leads to more complex ways of thinking and doing it. Interestingly enough, the act of doing leads to more complex acts of doing. Interestingly enough. So we give, in this kind of research, I actually give students a problem to solve. And that as they are busy doing that problem solving, we watch how they go about solving the problem and try to look for patterns in that behavior. And I watch people solve this. When I do my research, I watch individuals work on the problem over and over and over again. In my children, I had Cameron do the Hanoi Tower in going to different posts. I didn't stop with the first solution. I asked him to move that, to address the task by trying to build the tower on different posts. I think I did this with Jordan. I let him do the 3-disc on several posts, and then I went to the 5-disc. Jordan came to it at a higher level than Cameron did, so I felt comfortable pushing him into the 5-disc tower. All of you who are watching this, I'm asking you to work on the 5-disc tower as adults. And having seen the solution to the 3-disc tower, I think it's fair to ask you to work on the 5. Well, each time Jordan did it, if you watch Jordan, as he worked on the 5-disc tower, now I prompted him a little bit there just because of our time frame, and because he's a kid, so I gave him a little bit of support. And it's very interesting the place that I supported him had to do with moving that black large disc over from one side to the other side after he had cleared the way. Interestingly enough, he said he didn't see it. I'll come to that in a minute. He didn't see the move. In any event, still, what I had him do is do the task and then do the task again. Because the independent variable in this research is also the doing of something, and the doing of something leads to better ways of doing it. Even with it, by the way, notice, I didn't show or tell anybody how to do this. I asked them to do this on their own. Maybe I prompted Jordan just a slight bit. I've shown you a little bit on how to solve the 5-disc task, but I did stop and say, continue, and I prefer that you do it even without looking at me doing it at all. Why? Because structural research is about how the individual develops. It's really how the individual develops and the experiences that the individual provides for themselves often that lead to the development. It's, again, structural research ultimately gets at identifying stages of development in different domains. Stages of phonologic development in the work of Schreiberg and Klein and Bernhardt and Stolgamen, stages of cognitive development in the work of Piaget, stages of content form use development in the work of Bloom, stages of development of language function in the case of Halliday and Dorr and others, etc., etc., etc. Now, what are components of structural research? First of all, although we're trying to discover something new, stages in a new area, components of syntax. Chomsky's work, by the way, is structural as well. Whatever we're trying to discover, the discoveries are never in a vacuum. Something always supports the way we go and look at, approach our analysis of the data we get when we do structural research. Now, when Bloom did her research on content form use interaction development in children, she just watched 4 kids play. Against typical for structural studies is naturalness and the individual operating without direction. So she watched her kids play, and she collected data once every month for several years, actually, from the age of 16 months to 4 years, looking at 4 children in her work. And that's what structural research is about, often looking at individuals doing something over and over and over again. Something set up like a problem-solving task, but then something, a situation in which the individual is free to work on the problem their own way, you see. Then what happens is you transcribe the actual behavior of the individuals. So Bloom transcribed every single statement that her kids made over the several years she observed them on a monthly basis. So she transcribed thousands on top of thousands of utterances. I would transcribe every single move that the problem solver goes through in the Tower of Hanoi task. So I look at video of children or adults and write down every single thing they do and every single thing they say. That's another part of structural research. The transcription of all behavior, everything that's done by individuals. So then you have a lot of behavior from few individuals, one by one. That's another quality or feature of structural research: few subjects or participants, few participants. Bloom studied 4 children to generate the content form use taxonomy format that we're studying in language acquisition. Piaget studied 1 child, his own, to generate his stages. In the long run, he studied many more as he developed his equilibration model. But at the very beginning of his career, it was his own child who was the subject. Chomsky studied himself. He typically talked to himself, said a sentence, and asked himself, why is this a good sentence? Then tried to flip the words around a little bit, spoke to himself and said, why is this a problematic sentence? And that led to his identification of syntactic structures, such as phrase structures, that we will be looking at in acquisition, by the way. Research I referred to initially. So a lot of bones, 1 homonym. Now they'll be looking for other homonyms, but based on 1 skeleton that was put together, the researchers came to a major conclusion that they had identified a new species of homonym that had never been discovered before. How many models of dinosaurs, how many actual dinosaurs have been discovered around the world? Not many, but a lot of specific parts of the dinosaurs. In anthropological research, when researchers visit communities to identify aspects of the culture, of new cultures, they can't study everybody. They study a few representative individuals from a culture or representative interactions within the culture. and collect a lot of data from several people who are seen as representative of the culture. And therefore demonstrate this feature of structural research, and that is the study of a lot of behavior from few people. Now, why that? Why that approach? Well, because when you're dealing with the culture, one presumes that the people you select from the culture can represent the broader culture. When you're a Chomsky or a Piaget or a Bloom, you presume that the individuals that you study are part of a species, that is the human species, and that what you're looking for are universal things, that is qualities of behavior that are shared by other humans. You have to be careful, of course, to separate out the cultural piece from the species-specific piece. Any way you cut it, structural research is research in which a lot of behavior is examined in few representatives of either a culture or a species. And what one looks for in this research is patterns of things. In the original Bloom research on child language, she looked for patterns of ideas that kids spoke about. In the work with the hominem, it's patterns of features of these bones that identify the bones as belonging to this particular family of hominins. In phonology, it's features of sound that group sounds, etc. That is, features patterns are looked for in the behavior. That's what we search for, patterns. In the Hanoi Tower task, I will discuss the patterns of behavior that I've identified in individuals who learn over time how to resolve the problem. You'll see I posted an article by Wansert on that. By the way, Blanchet, B-L-A-N-C-H-E-T, is the person who did the original research on the Tower of Hanoi from a neo-Piagetian perspective, that has identified stages in the development of that. Patterns of behavior. Another feature of structural research is that these patterns of behavior we identify in whatever field we are looking at are always informed to begin with, informed by previous research that was done and development as it was viewed in previous research. So Bloom's content categories, particularly those content categories existence and action and locative action, are very much based on Piaget's work, original work on sensory motor development and preoperational development in children, and his areas of cognition and cognitive achievements. So that the content category existence should remind us all of Piaget's term called object permanence, you see, because Piaget identified the object permanence as an important stage of cognitive development, and existence is a parallel type of thing in Bloom's framework. In my work, these stages that individuals go through as they solve the problems that I've studied are very much influenced by Piaget's stages of my identification of those stages, and the way I characterize them are informed by Piaget's stages, sensory motor, pre-operation, concrete operation, and formal operation. Quality of those stages are what I initially look for as I study problem solving in individuals and look for patterns in problem solving behaviors. Now, what happens is you start out with other people's research and the kinds of stages or structures that they identify, and then you modify as a researcher. You let the data that you're looking at talk to you, in a sense, so that you might start out knowing Piaget's stages, but then in the Tower of Hanoi task, you might then see that their individuals are doing unique things. There are unique behavioral patterns that you're identifying. And then you develop a unique set of stages that apply to this particular task that may not apply to the that Piaget may not have discovered, so that you're doing something, you're identifying something unique. If you're visiting a new culture, you start out knowing your own language or your own customs in one area or another. So that's where your mind is at maybe when you first start looking at these individuals, but you notice differences in patterns of behavior or in linguistic patterns. That is, patterns of behavior, again, in the language area perhaps, that are in contrast to your own. So then you start you let that data talk to you, and you identify patterns unique to a particular culture or unique to a particular language, and also patterns that compare to your own, and thus try to come to an understanding of development and the way behavior is organized that's unique to the culture or to the problem or to the discovery you've made in a particular area. I think this is about as far as I'm going to go right now, because what I would like you to do is play with create a Hanoi Tower protocol for yourself. You'll also find Hanoi Tower online. You could see electronic versions of that game, which you could play, but I presume I prefer the physical. I think it gives you a better basis for development. And I'm going to ask you over the next week to practice doing it over and over again. Do the task over and over again, and ask yourself, as you make your first move, each move, why am I doing it? Why am I moving this way? Why am I moving that way? What am I doing? And then next week I'm going to talk about, next time I'll start with patterns and therefore the basis of development as I see it in the Tower of Hanoi task that comes from transcribing everything people say when they do this task, this Tower of Hanoi task, and every move that individuals make when they do the task, and the problems they run into over and over again, and try to give you an explanation of what are the developmental stages or phases in the solution of that particular task, and what's structural about it all. Okay? That's as far as I want to go today. And then I'm going to talk about experimental research and quasi-experimental research next time around. Okay.